We're looking at Exodus. And I'm going to start with verses 22 through 26. Item number 1 from this part of the law that's given to Moses here is about idols and altars. Exodus 20, verses 22 through 26. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, you have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. Make an altar of earth for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, lest your nakedness be exposed on it." So again, these are for the Israelites. I don't know if you're aware, Jesus is our sacrifice, so we don't need to offer the sacrifice of animals anymore. In fact, we should not be doing that. That is not what we're called to do in the church. Jesus paid the price once for all. His blood genuinely washes us free from our sins, while the blood of those animals that used to be offered on that altars symbolically foreshadowed the need of blood to wash people's sins away, but it couldn't genuinely do that on its own. And so we see that. What do we see in this passage? We see a reminder that God is real, living, and personal. God is not a statue. We are not to make a statue of him. He is real, he is living, he is personal. Now, that doesn't just apply to statues. I doubt too many of you have been tempted to create a golden statue or a marble statue of God. If you have, okay. I have not been tempted along those lines. But it can be tempting to set up other things in place of God. And this really works two ways. One is to put up something in place of God. We see in the New Testament, Jesus speaks of the love of money as the root of all evil, and you cannot serve two masters. Well, money can be your God. And you aren't praying to it, I hope. That would be really, you got big problems if you're doing that. But money can be your God in that you pursue it, you worship it. And what do you mean worship? You're like, I don't worship that, I worship God. Well, what does worship? Worship is you praise it, you say good things about it. You're like, here's my money, let me tell you how good it is. Here's my stuff, let me tell you how good my stuff is. Here's my job, let me tell you how good my job is. And you just spend all your time talking about your money and your stuff and your job, and you're pretty much worshiping it. And what else could you set up as an idol in your life? You could worship your family. You could say, here's my family, they're amazing. Isn't he cute? He runs on stage and he makes everybody laugh. I better not worship my son. I better not worship my wife. I better not worship my family. I would be setting that in place of God. But it's not just that. So that's one thing to be aware of, and it's something I know. I've been around this church a long time. I'm older than I look. Some of you know that. But it's also setting up an image of God. And that is something we can do as well. We can say, you know what, I'm worshiping God. I'm worshiping Jesus. But Jesus takes the form of this. I know, my goodness, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, there was the WWJD movement. Everybody remember that? What does WWJD stand for? What would Jesus do? And they had these bracelets. Everybody had the little bracelets. If you were in youth group 20 or 30 years ago, you had a bracelet that said WWJD. What would Jesus do? And you were told, very likely, or this is what you might have heard, that, you know what? If you're tempted by sin, take a look at your bracelet, be reminded, what would Jesus do? Think, what would Jesus do? And then don't sin. Well, it was very easy to turn that bracelet into an idol. It's very easy to say, I'm not going to look to Jesus himself. I'm going to look to my image of Jesus, my mental image of Jesus. This is my Jesus, that he told me to do this thing because I heard this or heard that. That's an idol. And you can easily set that idol up, a subtle tradition. And again, this is what the Israelites did several times. They did it with the golden calf. Again, we'll see that later in Exodus, where they said, this is God. They didn't say, this is some other God. They didn't say, this is Isis or Osiris or Zeus that got us out of Egypt. They're like, no, this is God. This is Yahweh. He got us out of Egypt. He looks like this. And they did the same thing in the northern kingdom when the kingdom of Israel split into two, Judah and the northern kingdom. And the northern kingdom, they're like, we don't have the temple, so we better set up a statue. We better set up an altar and a statue of a calf again. They kept wanting God to look like a calf. I don't know why. But that was the idea, is, hey, we're worshiping God. We're worshiping Yahweh or Jehovah or the great I am. Here he is. He's a statue. And so we need to be careful of that as well. God is not a thing, and God isn't even your mental image of him. God is a living, real, active being that surpasses my understanding and surpasses my ability to hold him as a mental image. In fact, in the early church, they even struggled with depicting Jesus. Do I even draw a picture of Jesus? It feels weird. I'm okay with that. I think we're okay. But if that picture of Jesus that you've drawn starts to replace the real Jesus, then it's a problem. And that has happened. There are people that struggle with that, and there are people that don't. But I think about it. You picture Jesus, and you're like, man, I got this painting that used to hang on the wall in this one place, and that's Jesus when I picture him. That's a problem. If, on the other hand, that reminds me of Jesus, that's great. I talked to an Orthodox priest one time. I was at an Orthodox church. Oddly enough, it was a field trip for a class I was taking in school. I was taking a humanities class, and there was extra credit. Go to the Greek Orthodox Church in Oakland. So I went there, and it was because they one of the things they do in the Orthodox Church, they have mosaics and paintings all over the walls. They call it iconography, images. And the priest will walk in, and many of the people will walk in, and they'll walk up to an image of a Bible story, and they will kiss the wall. And I talked to the priest, and I don't remember how much I said. I don't think I said too much because, here I am, some 19-year-old kid, and I'm like, I don't know what I know. But I talked to the priest, and somehow it came up what is that about? Because that seems really weird to me. And he's like, I get it. It seems really weird to you. He said, for me, it's like a picture. He's like, if I had a picture of a loved one, I might kiss that picture if they're not around to remind me that I'm kissing that person as best I can. It's like, if I'm away from my family, I might do that. I'm like, that's cool. But if that crosses the line and you're like, this picture is, then it's no good. And so again, there's that danger. So again, we're okay with images of Jesus and of saints, and if you look at that, you go, man, I read about Daniel and it moved me, and it's so beautiful what he did. Fine. I have no problem with that tradition of going, hey, here's a cool little image to remind me of that, and if it moves you, great. But don't let it replace God. Don't let it replace that living, active relationship with just a picture. Because if you have a picture and you no longer have your family, if I took my wife and said, hey, sweetheart, I want to get a great picture of you, I'm going to hang it up, and then you know what, you can go ahead and move out of the house, it's fine, I've got a picture. Maybe I'll do a cardboard cutout, life size. That doesn't work. But if I have a picture, because I'm like, you know what, I want to see you all the time. Anytime I want to open my wallet and go, hey, there's a picture. What else did we see here? We saw that God deserves offering. God deserves offerings. What is an offering? Again, sacrifices, we can't really offer that in the same way the Israelites did. But offerings, yes. Free will, saying, you know what, God, this is yours. You deserve this. Everything I have comes from you, and I owe you some part of that to demonstrate that. That's great. So we can learn from the law in that way. God talks about how to build an altar. Well, how does this help us? We're not offering sacrifices. I assume you're not building altars either. I don't know. That'd be kind of weird. But he says to build the altar without dressed stones, with just natural rocks. And again, that's unusual. Many people, if you want to build an altar, you're going to get a stonemason to make a beautiful altar. I don't know what else you make them out of, but surely you would want to make it beautiful. And basically God's saying, I want a pile of rocks. If you're going to make an altar, just a pile of rocks, not dressed stones. Don't cut them. Well, why would he do that? Well, to say that he is the one that shaped the stones. Even if we're offering something to him, we can't even offer it to him without him giving us the grace to be able to do that. That we can learn from this. And the final thing in this first passage, God is practical. We can learn that about God. God is practical. Now, he's supernatural, and he can ignore the laws of nature, supersede the laws of nature anytime he wants to. Wants to have a virgin birth? He can have a virgin birth. Wants to raise somebody from the dead? He can raise somebody from the dead. Wants to create a human being out of the dust of the earth? He can do that. Wants to create a second human being out of the first human being's rib? He can do that too. But he's also practical, and these laws he gives the Israelites, he says, don't build an altar with steps, because if you do, we got a problem. Because people back then were wearing robes and tunics. And I remember I was on a tour of a lighthouse one time, and they've got these spiral staircases. Have you ever been to a lighthouse? And I remember the tour guide, before we went up the spiral staircase, she said, you know what, I got to warn you. I had a lady on this tour once, and she was an elegant lady. She was visiting America from France, and she was wearing a dress, and she went up the stairs. And it was really quite embarrassing for her. Because there's a bunch of people below her on the stairs, and they got a view of more than the lighthouse. And God's saying, we don't want that happening when you're worshiping me, when you're offering things on the altar. And again, you may think, you're chuckling. You're like, this is ridiculous. Why is this in the Bible? It's in the Bible because God says, you know what, I care about the details. I care about the details. God cares about the details. God cares about things that you might think you would overlook. If I had written the Bible, I would have forgotten that. We should definitely not have stairs on the altar. Also, you'll notice God has to give that instruction. The neighboring cultures, they had no problem with people getting a view of that in their services. In fact, they had ritual prostitution in some of their temples. Like, okay, it's a temple. This is what we do here. So that is not what God's about.